What is going on, Soccer Fiends? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day, and today we are here with a video on what the USMNT's qualification means for the World Cup. I say it with quotations because basically on goal differential, if we lose by 6 goals to Costa Rica Wednesday, then we will have to go to a playoff game. If we lose by any less than 6 goals, or we draw or win, then we're good. So basically, we're good, I'll throw the jinx out there, we'll be fine. So, with that, what does that mean for the USMNT market? I think a lot of people are probably asking themselves this question, and it's one that, I find myself battling with as well. And really what it means, as far as the underlying premise behind all of it, is it gives us some certainty in the market. Markets don't do the best when there is uncertainty. So, say you're a casual fan of soccer in the United States, and you hear that the U.S. is in World Cup qualification stages, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, we didn't qualify for the last one, so I don't know if we'll qualify for this one. And personally, being a big fan of the USMNT, I was pretty confident we'd qualify throughout almost all of this. The only time I was a little nervous was after the first little window, but beside that, I've been feeling pretty good. And so, for a casual fan, and I don't use that word to diminish or demean anyone, I'm just saying, from an outsider's perspective that's looking in on the USMNT, they're probably like, yeah, I'm not gonna hop all in on the USMNT until I know that something is happening, or until I know that they're gonna be on the World Cup. I'm not gonna care until they make me care. That's how most fans are. A lot of us are diehards for the USMNT, and so that's not as much the case. But for most people, that's the general opinion on how they follow the sport. And so, obviously, for those of us that are into the weeds a lot, we've seen this coming. Now, for the average fan, probably not. And giving that certainty to the market allows people to operate with a bit more confidence in themselves, in the moves that they're making and what they're seeing. They can feel better, because there's nothing worse than if you were to go out and buy a Christian Pulisic rookie. Say you want to buy a select and a PSA 9, it's like $100, $150, maybe in a 10 it's like $400 or $500. If you drop that money on the team, and then next thing you know, we don't make it to the World Cup, you're going to feel like an idiot. So I think a lot of people were viewing it from that perspective, just trying to make sure that they would be okay. And we saw in the last day, there's actually been like 100 or 150 Pulisic sales on eBay, and I can see that growing over time. Obviously not that much every single day, but collectively the sales that we were seeing are going to look a lot smaller than the sales we will be seeing. Now, what I like to tell people is, if you're really going to be someone that enjoys the USMNT, you're not just going to be coming in for a quick flip. If you're going to be someone that's watching them, collecting them, and being a part of it for a long time, you really should view it from the lens of, well, what happens after the World Cup? Because, of course, there's going to be this, I would imagine there's going to be somewhat of a run-up as we head into the World Cup. I don't think that's a hot take. But once the World Cup is done, what is there to look forward to from the fans' perspective, the buyer's perspective for the USMNT? It's going to be another 3.5 years until we host the World Cup here, and that's a pretty long time horizon for people in the card market who are pretty fickle. So keep that in mind. If you really love the team, if you really want to be a part of it, if you really want to find a good entry point, I wouldn't imagine your greatest entry point is going to be going towards the World Cup. Now, what I will say is, with the certainty of the USMNT being there, it does provide liquidity for the market, in the sense that there are going to be a good amount of buyers, there also are going to be a good amount of sellers, and so the market can operate a little bit more efficiently. Now, that also means that there will be times where, you can find deals, because typically if something falls through the cracks, at least in the past, that might mean that that's the new floor, and that's kind of where something might stable out at. But with the World Cup coming up, there are going to be things that fall through the cracks a little bit, while the floor will maintain a higher price for the most part. Basically, what I'm saying is, say for instance, I'm seeing probably May and June. So from my perspective, I think that the market for the USMNT will heat up in this next month or two, because people are going to find out, oh, the US is in the World Cup, what are the best players to buy, who should we be going after, this is the guy, that's the guy, this, that, and the other, let me go buy some stuff. And then as we hit May and June, and people have already gotten that news, and we're still 5-6 months away from the World Cup, and people are doing whatever they're doing for the summer, maybe May, June, and July, there'll probably be a little lull, and then as we ramp up towards the World Cup, I think it'll be, a little bit more crazier. Now, for the USMNT, I view it differently compared to how I view the rest of the soccer card market when it comes to the World Cup and sort of how the market will play out. Now, of course, no one knows exactly how the market's going to play out, so for me to say that I know would be blasphemy. No one knows. But with people that are really into the soccer card, basically, there's a section that are really into soccer cards, and there's a section that are going to be kind of into soccer cards. I think a lot of the people that are really into soccer cards that are going to be prospecting on European players or proven players or all that, they'll be buying those players the whole lead up to the World Cup. And so the peak for those guys might be a couple months before the World Cup, because it takes more knowledge to really know about that. It takes a lot of research, a lot of dedication. And so the people that are really into the weeds, they might not be as inclined to buy once the World Cup hits. Now with the USMNT crowd, with the people that are a bit more casual, they're not really too into the weeds of it all. I think it'll probably actually be once something happens in the World Cup. You know, for a lot of players, the World Cup isn't going to do much for your cards. Let's be real. Because when you look back at past World Cups, how many notable players do you remember that you look at their cards and you're like, oh, I got to go out and buy that card because they had a good World Cup that go around? It's not many. So for the average player, the World Cup probably isn't going to do much. It's more so the hype up to the World Cup and the people joining the hobby and all of that that'll really increase their prices. And with the US players, it's really going to be about what they do at the World Cup. I mean, who starts, who's there. For instance, if a player on the US gets injured a few weeks before the World Cup, I think that would really hurt their prices because people aren't going to really see them. They're not going to really ingrain them with what they remember for the USMNT. While, say, if like Harry Kane got injured before the World Cup, I mean, I'm sure it would also hurt his prices, to be honest with you, but the floor wouldn't come out on the card. Like, the floor might come out on a USMNT player's card if he doesn't appear in the World Cup. Say someone that's somewhat middling. I mean, Anthony Robinson would be a good example. Sure, he's great. I love him. But he's a player that if he doesn't appear at the World Cup, by 2026, he might not be our left back. And so really, what sort of long-term memorable instances will you have associated with Anthony Robinson? It would be very few. And so the floor on that player could really just disintegrate. And I don't view that happening as much with a lot of the other players that I'm talking about from the more dedicated soccer fan perspective. And so that's something to also be keen on as well. I think the players that will do really well will be sort of the mainstay stars. Your Christian Pulisic, your Weston McKennie, your Giovanni Reina, maybe Serginho Dest as well. I think those guys have an immense ceiling. Whoever our striker is, if he shows up, could also do that. Maybe it's Pepe, maybe it's Ferreira, maybe it's Pifuk. I know people don't want to hear that after one miss, but before that, everyone was clamoring for it. Maybe it's Sargent. Maybe it's Altidore. Maybe it's Sardes. Who knows? But maybe it's one of them. But that's going to be much more performance-based. I think in the hype leading up to the World Cup, it's mostly going to be Pulisic, McKennie, Reina, Dest, and that's most all I see. Maybe you could get a little Tyler Adams love in there. Maybe some Yunus Musa as well. Maybe some Tim Weah. But it's really going to be star power that brings a lot of value to these cards, because if you look at it from, again, a somewhat casual perspective, it's going to be hard for them to hop into the USMNT and want to buy a second string winger. Say, for instance, a Brendan Aronson. I know I always kind of roast him, but it's just because I don't really see him as a starter at any position. And so if that's the case, you're just not going to get the love, at least initially. Now, maybe once, a ton of players move in price, if that happens, then maybe he also moves, but that's a little bit more risky. I think the people that won't do too well as we head towards the World Cup and through the World Cup are going to be, like I said, sort of those middling players, those B-tier players that are still good, still great, like depth options, still happy to have them on the team, but I don't know if the collective fan base is really going to want to buy cards or little pictures of those guys. Again, no one ever looks at this the way it should be looked at, but cards are a very speculative asset where you are buying a picture of a player. Like, you got to really love that player. You got to really love the team. You got to really love whatever you're getting into there. And so for those guys, that might not be as much the case. I think also the people that are going to be left behind, and some people might not want to hear this either, are sort of the youngest of young prospects. Say your Paxton Aronson, your Caden Clark type player, your Cade Cowell. I think those guys, their prices, the way I see the market right now, are pretty high. And what are they going to do? odds are none of those guys make the World Cup squad. I'd be surprised if they did, especially given Greg Berhalter's past tendencies to only go with what he really knows and trusts, like a Joe Scally example of what happened recently. So those youngest of young prospects, I really don't think have a ton of upside, because for them to move, all of the guys above them have to move. And so you're sort of capped out there. So that's one thing I would warn people on. But overall, what I think that this World Cup qualification really does for the USMNT market and for the soccer market in general, it really solidifies the future, I guess. Because if, for instance, the US didn't make it to this World Cup, I mean, that would be terrible, because we didn't make it to the last one. And if you've been really a part of the fan base over the last few years, the fan base has grown immensely around how good these players are getting. But if there would have been a World Cup 4 years ago that we were in, this fan base would have been so much bigger. And if there wasn't a World Cup that happened this time, this fan base, again, probably would still grow, but it could be so much bigger. And if we would have missed 2 straight World Cups, that would have been really, really detrimental. And also, going forward, looking into the future, if we miss the 2022 World Cup, how much real excitement can we have for 2026? I know a lot of us in the USMNT community, we like to talk about 2026 as if it's this big, just monumentous cup that's going to happen, where we're gonna bring it home. Now, obviously, that's very wishful. We probably won't be anywhere close to that, but we like to believe. We like to have far-reaching dreams. And if we didn't qualify in 2022, we can't have those far-reaching dreams in 2026. So this allows us to dream for 2026, which is great. And even beyond that, if you're looking at the long-term perspective of the card market and U.S. soccer in particular, if we didn't make it to 2 straight World Cups, the card market, there's not going to be as many people that are rabid fans of the team. And for the youth that is to come in the next 20, 30 years, they're not going to be big fans of the team either, because they didn't see much from them. So this really is, I think, kind of the powder keg moment where the sparks set off. And with 2022, we start to get the ball rolling a little bit. 2026 is going to be massive. And then from there, I think the US is a very amazing long-term place to be, not only as a card collector, investor, whatever you may be, but also as a fan. I think that this is just the beginning as far as USMNT soccer is concerned on a world stage. Sure, we've had moments in the past, but I think we're truly entering a different era, and if we would have missed this World Cup, it would have been a major setback. So, given that didn't happen, we can all sleep a little bit safer at night, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, enjoyed my thoughts on the World Cup qualification, and would love to hear yours down below in a comment as well. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. On top of that, if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.